Have you ever witnessed an innocent creature abandoned, trapped in a fate it cannot escape? A small, defenseless family of dogs is tied to the tracks as a train approaches at an unstoppable speed. In the middle of a deserted Texas railroad track, a man stumbles upon a scene that stops his heart. A mother dog is tied up, 3 puppies shivering beside her, while a train is approaching at a terrifying speed. Who did this? And will he be able to save them before it is too late? But when the truth is revealed, it is more cruel than he could have imagined. A mistake can be forgotten, but can a cruel act be forgiven? Before we continue, please comment and tell us where in the world you are watching this video, and we have a little challenge for you. Watch this video until the end. Do you dare to accept the challenge? If the answer is yes, comment, "I accept the challenge," to show your determination. And if you believe in touching stories, don't forget to subscribe the channel now, because tomorrow there will be a special story for you. The cold winds of late winter blew through the Texas hayfields, whispering something about to happen. The sun was setting behind the distant mountains, dyeing the sky a brilliant orange. On the old railroad tracks that ran through the outskirts of town, a tragedy was unfolding. In the middle of the tracks, a mother golden retriever was tied tightly with coarse rope. Her golden fur was now covered in dirt, her eyes glittering with fear. She did not scream or fight back. Perhaps she knew she could not escape. But in her heart, she still held a fragile hope for her 3 young children who were shivering and huddled against her. The puppies made weak whimpers. They were too young to understand what was happening, but they could sense the unease in their mother's rapid breathing. A strong wind blew through, swirling with dust and dry leaves. And then, the train whistle blew through the air. In the distance, a train was approaching, its headlights tearing through the falling darkness. The sound of the wheels grinding against the rails created a deafening screech, signaling the approach of death. The mother dog closed her eyes, her body trembling slightly. She was ready to accept her fate. But what if this wasn't the end? On the other side of the field, Mark Reynolds was finishing his last delivery of the day. A day like any other. Empty roads and small towns passed quietly outside the truck window. Mark was all too familiar with this. A life as monotonous and repetitive as the roads he drove through every day. Many years ago, he had a happy family. But after the breakup of his marriage, Mark lost touch with his son, Logan. The boy had been his whole world, but now they had brief, cold conversations on the phone. A lonely father, a distant son. Mark sped up, wanting to finish work quickly and get home. But then, a small sound rang out. At first, he thought he was imagining things, but no. It was a whine, weak, almost carried by the wind. Mark frowned, instinct telling him to stop the car. He opened the door and stepped out. The space around him was eerily quiet. But when Mark looked toward the tracks, he froze. There, right in the middle of the tracks, was a small family of dogs, tied up, facing imminent death. And what chilled him most of all, the train was coming. Mark rushed forward, his heart pounding. He had no time to think, no time to hesitate. The train whistle was getting louder. The train was less than 20 seconds away. Mark knelt beside the mother dog, his hands shaking as he tried to untie the rope that was tightening around her neck. But it was too tight. The puppies huddled against her, their eyes filled with fear. Mark felt his breathing quicken. He couldn't imagine what would cause someone to tie these innocent creatures to the tracks, leaving them to die like that. 15 seconds. Mark pulled with all his might, but the rope wouldn't budge. He began to panic. 10 seconds. The train was coming, its headlights shining directly into his eyes. The wheels screeched, but it couldn't stop in time. Mark glanced at the mother dog and met her eyes. At that moment, he understood everything. She wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid of losing her pup. 5 seconds. Don't give up. Mark gritted his teeth, putting all his strength into one last strong pull. The rope snapped. Mark gathered the entire family of dogs in his arms and rushed toward the grass. As soon as he rolled off the tracks, the train roared past like a hurricane, creating a wind pressure so strong that it almost knocked him over. The wheels screeched. The train whistle echoed across the countryside. But Mark couldn't hear anything anymore. All he knew was they were safe. Mark held the little puppies tightly, feeling their panicked heartbeats gradually stabilize. The mother dog looked up at him. Her eyes no longer filled with fear, but with deep gratitude. But Mark knew this wasn't the end. Who had tied them here? How could anyone be so cruel? And what could he do to help them and himself? Stay tuned to discover the horrifying truth behind this tragedy and the emotional journey of redemption for the people who caused it. If this story touches you, please leave a like to help spread the message. The air was cold as the train roared past, creating a gust of wind so strong that it blew the dry leaves on the ground. Mark fell to the grass, breathing heavily as if he had just escaped the jaws of death. In his arms, the puppies trembled, clinging to his body as if seeking some warmth, some safety. The mother dog, after a moment of panic, slowly raised her head. Her eyes looked at Mark, no longer filled with fear, but with infinite gratitude. How could someone do this? Mark still couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. Someone had deliberately tied them here, left them to die in agony. Anger crept through him, mixed with horror. The puppies couldn't have tied themselves up. This wasn't an accident. This was intentional. And Mark knew someone had to be responsible. Mark took the family home, wrapping them in a warm blanket. The mother dog curled up on the floor, her eyes never leaving Mark, as if she knew he was the only one she could trust. The next morning, the story of the rescue spread throughout town. Everyone was shocked and outraged. Who could be so cruel? This can't be ignored. Mark had the same question, and when the local police opened an investigation, a surprising piece of information left him speechless. It was his son, Logan, and his group of friends who had done this. Mark's heart slowed down. Everything before his eyes seemed to be shaking. It couldn't be. But then, the pieces of the truth began to come together. Logan, the boy he had loved so much, the boy he had thought still had an innocent soul, was part of this cruel joke? Mark pushed open the door and entered the house, where Logan was sitting on the sofa, eyes glued to his phone. Little did he know that his father knew everything. Logan. Mark's voice was sharp. The boy looked up, slightly confused. What, Dad? Do you know anything about dogs tied to the tracks? A flash of concern crossed Logan's eyes, but he quickly avoided the question. I don't know. Someone in town must have done it. Mark tried to keep his composure. He looked straight at his son, not taking his eyes off him. Don't lie to me, Logan. The room fell silent. Logan looked down and pursed his lips. He knew he couldn't hide it anymore. You wouldn't understand, he blurted out, his tone a mixture of defiance and disregard. Mark walked over and sat down across from his son, trying to contain his anger. "Help me understand." Logan took a deep breath, then finally confessed. He and his friends, Jake, Mason, Emily, had tied the dogs to the tracks as a joke, a stupid challenge someone had come up with. "We didn't think anything would happen," Logan said, his voice trailing off. "It was a joke." "A joke?" Mark felt a wave of anger rise in his chest. "Do you realize what you've done, Logan?" His voice was low, dangerous. It wasn't a joke. It was a crime. Logan bowed his head, his hands clenching into fists. He didn't answer. "Those dogs could have died, Logan. They could have been crushed right before your eyes. And you thought it was just a game?" The room was so quiet you could hear Mark's heavy breathing. Mark looked into his son's eyes. At first, he appeared indifferent. But deep inside, Mark saw something else. A flicker of regret, a fear that Logan didn't want to admit. So Mark didn't yell, didn't punish right away. He knew, if he wanted his son to truly understand, he had to feel it for himself. "If you think this is just a joke," Mark said, "then you're the one responsible for them." Logan looked up, frowning. "What do you mean?" "I'm not just talking. I want you to care for them with me, until you understand that they're not toys, but living beings with feelings, with pain." Logan opened his mouth to protest. Then he looked toward the corner of the room, where the mother dog was quietly watching. Her eyes were gentle, but also filled with hurt. For the first time, Logan looked into her eyes, and he felt his heart constrict. That day, Logan was no longer a boy who was indifferent to the consequences of his actions. He and his friends began a journey of redemption, taking care of the dog family instead of just watching them suffer. At first, the group was reluctant, but as each day passed, each moment they saw the puppies gradually recover, their hearts changed. But the story is not over yet. Will Logan truly understand his mistakes? Will he be able to fix what he has caused? And will Mark be able to heal the broken relationship between father and son thanks to these little creatures? Stay tuned to witness this journey of transformation, a story not only about abandoned dogs, but also about redemption, compassion, and how one person can change forever. If this story touches your heart, click share to spread this message to more people. The small house fell into a tense silence. The yellow light bounced off the old walls, casting long shadows on the wooden floor. Mark looked straight at Logan, his eyes both disappointed and heartbroken. "Do you know what you've done?" His voice was low and heavy. Logan turned away, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his hoodie. "You're exaggerating. It was just a joke." Mark closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to control the anger rising in his chest. "No, Logan, this isn't a joke. This is life." The boy didn't respond immediately, but when Mark stepped aside, revealing the mother dog curled up in the corner of the room, Logan suddenly stopped. Her eyes, no sound, no protest, just pure hurt and fear. Logan swallowed, his heart pounding in his chest. Guilt, the emotion he had tried to deny, began to creep into his thoughts. Images flashed through his mind like slow motion. The group laughing, the leash around her neck, the puppies tied up. Logan remembered the look in her eyes then, and the same look he had now. A long silence. Finally, Mark broke it. "If you think this is a joke, then you're responsible for them from now on." Logan looked up, frowning. "What do you mean?" "I don't need an apology. I want you to understand. You'll take care of them. You'll see for yourself how hurt, how scared, how much you need love. It's the only way you can make it up to me." Logan opened his mouth to protest. Then he looked back at the mother, and instead of making excuses, he fell silent. It was the first time he started to think. The next morning, Logan stood at the door of the doghouse, confused. The mother dog looked at him warily. The puppies crept forward, but immediately hid behind their mother when they realized who he was. A pang of guilt twisted Logan's insides. His friends were there now. Jake, Mason, and Emily all looked reluctant, standing back as if they just wanted this to be over as quickly as possible. But Mark wouldn't let them escape. "You guys caused this, and you can fix it." No one objected. They knew he was right. The first few days were a challenge. Jake, who always seemed tough, muttered, "These dogs don't like me." But then, he started making toys from old pieces of wood. One day, a little puppy came running over, happily wagging its tail at the new toy. Mason, the quietest boy in the group, always stood apart. But when he saw his mother's dog injured her leg, he prepared a bandage himself, carefully cleaning the wound. The dog looked at him with trust, as if for the first time in his life, Mason had done the right thing. Emily, who usually only cared about social media, initially didn't want to touch the dirty dogs. But then one day, when a puppy tried to climb onto her lap, its eyes lit up with absolute trust. And Emily, for the first time in her life, felt like she was really important to someone. And Logan. At first, he didn't know what to do. But then he noticed the smallest puppy in the pack, always pushed away by his older siblings. Somehow, he saw himself in it, abandoned too, also alienated, also hurt. Logan reached out, and for the first time, the puppy came forward, snuggling into his arms. Logan's heart slowed. For the first time in his life, he truly felt something deep. As each day passed, the wall between the children and these little creatures gradually collapsed. They no longer felt bothered by cleaning the dog crate. They no longer felt embarrassed about getting dirty when playing with the puppies. They no longer saw them as strangers. They were family. Mark watched from afar, his eyes filled with emotion. He didn't just see a group of teenagers learning to love. He saw Logan, his son, change every day. He no longer argued with him every time he was told to do something. He no longer avoided his father's eyes every time they met. He no longer locked himself in his room all day to avoid life. Mark knew that. They were slowly finding each other again. One night, Logan sat next to his mother dog, gently stroking her golden fur. She was no longer afraid of him. She believed him. A warm feeling spread through Logan's heart. And then, like a whisper from deep inside, he softly said, "I'm sorry." The mother dog couldn't answer, but she gently licked his hand like a silent forgiveness. That was when Logan understood that we can't change the past, but we can make amends with our actions. The children's journey is not over. But what will happen when the time comes to say goodbye? Will Logan be ready to lose these little friends? And will Mark be able to completely repair the father-son relationship that he once lost? Stay tuned to witness the final chapter of the story, where final lessons are taught and hearts find their way back home. If this story comes to you, please click like to help more people get the value of love and the third event. Winter was giving way to warm spring days. The Texas fields were no longer bare and cold. They were covered in green grass, and wildflowers were reaching for the sun. But there was a change more important than the weather. Hearts that had been separated had found each other again. The puppies were completely healed. They no longer trembled when people approached, no longer cowered at strange sounds. They had learned to trust. And now, it was time for them to find a new home. Mark called the kids over on a weekend afternoon. The puppies, now older, trotted around the yard, chasing the leaves that fell in the wind. They had no idea that today would be their last day together. Jake bent down to pick up one of the puppies, smiling, but with a sad look in his eyes. "He's going to miss me," Jake mumbled, stroking the puppy's head. "Not just him," Mason said, his voice softer than usual. Emily sat on the steps, quietly letting a small puppy rest its head on her leg. "I didn't think I'd love them this much," she admitted. "But now that we're apart, it's hard." Mark stood nearby, watching the children he'd thought heartless now clutch the little creatures they'd so heartlessly abandoned. The change was real. "We can always visit them," Mark said, his voice calm. "The important thing is that they have a good family, and you guys helped make that happen." Jake, Mason, and Emily nodded, but no one said anything more. Because they knew. There were no words to describe the feeling. After the cars rolled out of the yard, leaving a void filled with memories, Logan stood still, watching. Mark walked over to his son, waiting for him to say something, but Logan didn't turn around. "You know." His voice was hoarse, as if he had lost a part of himself. "I used to think I didn't need anyone. I didn't need a dog. I didn't need friends. I didn't need you." Mark didn't say anything. He just listened. Logan bent down to stroke the head of the mother dog, the girl he had named Sunny. "But I don't want to lose her now." Mark looked at Logan for a long time, then nodded slowly. "Then don't." Sunny wagged her tail, nuzzling Logan's leg. And for the first time in years, Logan felt like he belonged somewhere. In the days that followed, Logan no longer left the house right after dinner. He no longer avoided conversations with his father. He no longer quickly turned off his phone when Mark walked into the room. They didn't become a perfect family right away, but something had changed. When Mark opened the door on weekends, it no longer felt empty. Sunny's footsteps were heard running toward him, and Logan was sitting on the floor, doing his homework and playing with her. There was soft laughter as Sunny pretended to bite Logan's hand, asking him to play with her. The house was alive. Mark looked at the scene, feeling a warmth he thought he would never have again. He had lost his wife. He had lost his son. But now, maybe he was slowly finding Logan again. One late afternoon, Mark and Logan sat on the porch. The sun was setting behind the Texas hills, painting the sky a brilliant orange. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of grass and earth, evoking a peace they had not felt in a long time. Sunny curled up at their feet, her ears twitching at the small sounds in the wind. Logan broke the silence. "Do you think I can make it right?" Mark looked at his son, his eyes no longer as stern as before. "We can't change the past, Logan," he said softly, "but we can choose to fix it, with love and kindness." A light breeze blew by. Logan took a deep breath, feeling his chest lighten. "I think I'll try." Mark smiled, a real smile. "I know you can." They sat there in the sunset with Sunny. Nothing more needed to be said, because sometimes the most peaceful moments are the clearest answers. Sunny had a home. Logan had learned his lesson. Mark had found his son. But had things changed? Can Logan keep his heart from returning to darkness? Have the children truly learned the meaning of responsibility, or is this just a temporary moment? And most importantly, is this story over? Do you believe that a person can change completely? Do you think love can heal old wounds? If you have ever made a mistake, what would you do to fix it? Share your thoughts. And if this story touches your heart, click like so that YouTube can spread this message to more people. Because sometimes we don't need great things to change the world. We just need to start with a small action, a sincere apology, and a loving heart. And maybe, one day, that small thing will save someone, or yourself. Thank you for taking the time to follow this story to the end. Out of all the millions of stories on the internet, you chose to stay here, listen, and feel. That means more than anything. We know that time is the most precious thing each person has, and your taking these moments to join us in the story of Mark, Logan, and Sunny is an incredibly valuable thing. Thank you for opening up, for listening, for joining us on this emotional journey. This story, more than anything, is about us. Have you ever made a mistake and thought you could never fix it? Have you ever felt too far away from someone to reconnect? Or have you ever believed that just one small act, a little compassion, a hug, an apology, could completely change someone's life? We can't change the past, but we can choose to fix it. Logan learned that. And maybe right now, someone needs a chance to do the same. Leave a like if this story touches your heart. Share it to spread the message of love and forgiveness to more people. And let us know, how would you rate this story from 0 to 10? But don't stop here. The journey isn't over. Because in this big world, there are still countless stories that haven't been told. Stories that can change the way we see life, the way we love, the way we cherish every small but meaningful moment. So if you want to know what happens next, if you want to discover stories that touch your heart, make you think, make you cry, and smile, stay with us. Because the next story will be even more touching.